Welcome back to your last video on dividing fractions. In this video, we're going to solve word problems that involve dividing fractions and mixed numbers. First, let's review. So to divide a fraction by another fraction, remember in our last video, we learned that you can take your first fraction and multiply it by the reciprocal of the second fraction, which means my 8 and my 3 switch places. And then you multiply your fractions together. 32 over 15, and then we need to simplify. 15 times 2 is 30, so we can make two whole groups of 15. Because it's 30, there's 2 left over to get to 32, and then out of 15. So there is our final answer. So when you are dividing fractions in the real world, it is important that first you read your problems very carefully. You may recognize that a word problem requires division, but you might not you have to really pay attention to the order. You can't just go in and grab the numbers and divide, okay? So if you don't read carefully, you may get the wrong number, use the wrong numbers, or in the wrong order. So let's look at this problem. Francis and 3 other friends have 1/4 gallon of lemonade to share equally. How much lemonade will each person get? What division problem would you write to solve this problem? Think about it, choose an answer to check. So you always have to be thinking, what are you starting with? Okay, so your starting amount has to go first. And then you're always dividing by the groups. You can think of it as groups. You can think of it as how many will fit into this. Okay, in this example, our starting amount is the amount of lemonade they're sharing. They're sharing 1/4 gallon, so that has to go first. We're going to be dividing by the number of people. It's Francis and 3 friends, that's 4 people total, so we will be dividing by 4. Let's look at the next problem. Francis needs 4/5 meters of ribbon to make a bow. That means in order to make one bow, she needs 4/5 of a meter. She has 60 meters of ribbon. How many bows can she make? What division problem would you write? Think about it, choose an answer to check. Okay, again, what is our starting amount? How much ribbon does she have? She has 60 meters. So for this one, our starting amount is 60, and then the size of one bow is 4/5. So for this one, you can think how many 4/5 are in 60, and so that's how you know which way to start. So sometimes you may start with a fraction, sometimes you may start with your whole number. Here's some helpful tips. This would be a good time to pause and not write everything down, but just jot some notes down. There's a little process that you can follow when you're doing any real world problem, okay? You want to read the problem first, okay? So just read carefully, okay? Next thing is to write. So once you have read and you really understand what it's asking, write down the math problem that you need to solve. If you're doing division, double check that you have the numbers in the correct order. Read the word problem one more time just to make sure that you have everything in the right spot, okay? So write down the math problem and check that you have it correct. Next is to solve, okay? Write your steps so that whoever's grading your paper or looking over your paper knows exactly how you went about, and they can help you if you made a mistake somewhere, okay? Working too fast can also lead to careless errors, so just make sure you're taking your time. And then the last step sometimes gets skipped over, but you definitely want to check to make sure that your answer is reasonable. Does my answer make sense? Okay, if I would have gotten the answer for this first one, how much lemonade will each person get, and I got 16 cups, or I got 8 cups. Anything more than 1/4 would not make sense because I don't even have a whole gallon, excuse me, gallons, not cups. I don't even have a whole gallon to begin with, okay? For this one, if I wasn't even able to make a whole bow, that wouldn't make sense either because I'm starting out with a ton of ribbon. So I should be able to make a lot of bows. So just always stop and think, does my answer make sense? Okay, is it reasonable? Okay, here is practice problem 1. I challenge you to pause the video, give it a try, and see if you can go through that process. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is read. Mrs. O'Connor is making placemats. She has 7/8 yards of fabric. She uses 1/4 of a yard to make one placemat. How many whole placemats can she make? So we read. Now we're going to write our problem. So remember, what is she starting with? That's the number that goes first. And for this one, she is starting with this much fabric. I know that I'm going to be cutting it, which is my clue to divide. Okay. And then what size pieces? Okay. She's dividing it into 1/4 yards. So there's my writing. Now I'm going to solve. So remember, when we solve, we are going to multiply the first fraction, keep it the same, but multiply by the reciprocal of the next fraction. Then I'm going to multiply across the top. That is 28. Multiply across the bottom. That is 8. And now I just need to find whole placemats. Okay, so how many times does 8 go into 28 without going over? If I think about my 8 facts, I think 8, 16, 24, 32. So 4 placemats goes over 28. So 3 whole placemats would be my answer. And you could do 28 divided by 8. You're going to get 3 and some left over. Okay? Last practice problem. Go ahead and pause the video, give it a try, and then we'll talk about it. A recipe calls for 2 3/4 cups of nuts for each person. Antonia has 16.5 cups of nuts. How many people can she serve? Okay, so again, what is our whole amount or our starting amount? Okay, she is starting with this many. And she's dividing it into 2 3/4 for each person. Now, before we can divide, we have to make these into improper fractions. Remember that you multiply, then you add. So times, that's 32, plus 1, so we have 33. Your denominator stays a 2. For this one, 4 times 2 is 8. 8 plus 3 is 11. And then we have a 4 here. Okay, I'm gonna actually move up and for our next part, just to give myself a little more room. So 33 over 2 times, I'm gonna multiply by the reciprocal. So I'm going to flip. Okay. This is just a little extra, tip. When you're multiplying only, okay, you have to be multiplying, you can do what's called cross simplify, where if your numbers that are diagonal have a common factor, you can divide both of them by that common factor. So these are both in the 2 family. So 2 divided by 2 is 1, 4 divided by 2 is 2. Same here, these are both in the 11 family. So that becomes a 1, that becomes a 3, and my problem just got so much simpler. 3 times 2 is 6, 1 times 1 is 1, 6 people can be served. If you wouldn't have known to do the cross simplify, it would have been fine. You would have just done 33 times 4, and that is 132. I'm just going to put that extra work up here. 2 times 11 is 22, and 132 divided by 22 is 6 as well. So either way, you end up with the right answer. It just, you go about simplifying different ways. Before you leave, make sure you feel like you can solve word problems that involve dividing fractions and mixed numbers, and let me know if you have any questions.